The mining colony on Veyara 6 was a hard place to live. The air was heavy with dust from the machines, the ground cracked and dry, and the sky always seemed to hold a dull gray color. Humans had come there for resources, and the Veyari, an alien race with smooth skin and glowing eyes, had already lived there long before. Both groups shared the colony, but they did not share trust. Daniel was just one of many human workers. He was not special. He was not a soldier, not a leader, not even a loud voice among the miners. He kept his head down, worked long hours, and tried to stay away from trouble. His life was simple: work, eat, sleep, repeat. Yet inside, Daniel carried a quiet strength, one that no one ever noticed. One afternoon, after finishing his shift at the drilling site, Daniel walked through the outer streets of the colony. The pathways were narrow, lined with metal shelters and storage units. He heard a sound, a mix of laughter and crying. It caught his attention, and he slowed his steps. Around the corner, in the dusty open square, a group of human youths had surrounded a small figure. It was a Veyari child. She could not have been more than 8 in human years. Her skin glimmered faintly blue under the fading sun, her eyes wide and frightened. She was clutching a small crystal toy in her hand, holding it close as if it were the only thing keeping her safe. The human boys teased her, mocking her alien features. They blocked her path when she tried to run, circling her like a trap. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen such things before. Humans and Veyari lived side by side, but the tension never left. Most people ignored it. But this was different. She was just a child. He could have walked away. He told himself it was not his business. But his feet would not move forward. Instead, they carried him toward the group. "Enough," Daniel said, his voice steady but calm. The boys turned, surprised. They knew him. He was just the quiet worker, the man who never spoke up. "Stay out of this, Daniel," one of them said, frowning. "This isn't your problem." Daniel looked at the child. Her small hands trembled, her crystal toy shaking as if even that might slip from her grasp. He saw her eyes, full of fear, but also hope that maybe he might help. "It is my problem." "Now," Daniel replied. The boys didn't like that. They pushed him, shoved him, trying to force him away. Daniel did not raise his fists. He did not shout. He simply placed himself between the girl and the circle of boys, standing tall though his heart was heavy. "Go home," he said to the child softly, without turning his head. "Run." The girl hesitated, but then, with sudden courage, she slipped through the small gap Daniel created by standing firm. She ran as fast as her legs could carry her, the crystal clutched tightly to her chest. Daniel stayed behind. He felt hands push against his shoulders, heard angry words, but he kept calm. He did not fight back. He let the storm pass over him like rain on stone. By the time the boys grew tired of their game, the child was gone. When the group finally left, muttering insults, Daniel stood alone in the square. His clothes were dusty, his body sore, but he felt lighter inside. He took a deep breath, letting the evening air cool his skin. He knew some people would whisper about him, calling him a fool for interfering. Yet in his heart, he knew he had done the right thing. That night, Daniel returned to his quarters. He lived in a small metal room, barely large enough for a bed and a table. He sat down heavily, his mind replaying the scene. He wondered if the child had made it home safely. He hoped she had. Meanwhile, in another part of the colony, the little girl burst into her home, still clutching her crystal toy. Her mother looked up in surprise. She was tall and regal with the glow of authority in her silver eyes. This was no ordinary Veyari woman. This was Sarathia, leader of her people on the colony. The girl rushed into her arms, speaking quickly, telling her mother everything. She described how the humans had surrounded her, how she thought she could not escape, and how a human worker had stepped in to shield her. She spoke of how he endured their harshness without striking back, giving her the chance to run free. Sarathia listened carefully, her expression unreadable. To the Vayari, honor and sacrifice were sacred. They believed every action revealed a person's true spirit. And here was a human, someone from a race known for pride and division, who had chosen to suffer for the sake of a Vayari child. The queen's gaze hardened with thought. She had lived long enough to know that such acts were rare. She needed to know more about this man. Back in his small quarters, Daniel lay down to rest. He had no idea that his simple choice, to stand between a child and cruelty, had already begun to change his future. He did not know that eyes far greater than his own now watched him, weighing his heart, deciding what role he might play in a story far larger than he could imagine. The colony outside grew quiet as night fell. Yet in that silence, a seed had been planted. A seed of trust, of honor, and perhaps of something even greater. Daniel closed his eyes, unaware that tomorrow, nothing would be the same again. The morning sun rose slowly over Vayara 6, spreading a pale light across the mining colony. Dust particles floated in the air like tiny stars. The hum of machinery began once more, signaling the start of another long day. Humans went about their tasks with routine precision, and the Vayari moved with their quiet grace, tending to their own work. Yet beneath the usual calm, a quiet tension lingered, a tension born from the event of the previous day. Daniel woke earlier than usual. Sleep had been uneasy, filled with dreams of the small Vayari child, her glowing eyes wide with fear and gratitude. He remembered the push of human hands against his shoulders, the sharp words, and the heavy feeling of responsibility he had carried. For a moment he wondered if he had done the right thing. But deep inside he knew he had. Outside, whispers were already beginning among the Vayari. Word traveled fast in their close-knit community, and soon the story reached Queen Sarathia herself. She sat in her chambers, tall and composed, the soft light highlighting the silver tones in her skin. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, reflected a mixture of curiosity and concern. She risked nothing to herself, one of her advisors said. It was the human who stood in the square alone and shielded the child from harm. Sarathia nodded, slowly. Humans rarely act with such selflessness, she said. We must see for ourselves. Not every human would endure the suffering he faced. Her words carried weight. Among the Vayari, actions revealed truth more than words ever could. And here was a human whose actions had been clear. He had suffered, yet not retaliated. Meanwhile, Daniel walked through the colony performing his usual tasks. Yet he sensed a change. Vayari workers glanced his way, their eyes bright with curiosity. Some whispered among themselves, others simply nodded in recognition. Even the children seemed to notice him, stopping their games to look his way. He felt a mix of confusion and unease. Humans around him, however, avoided him. Some scowled, some muttered, wondering why he had involved himself with the aliens at all. That afternoon, while repairing a broken conveyor belt near the mining site, Daniel saw movement from the corner of his eye. The small Vayari child he had protected the day before approached him cautiously. She held something in her hands, a small pouch of herbs, carefully wrapped in soft leaves. For you, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel knelt to meet her gaze. For me? He asked, surprised. Yes, she said, a faint glow on her cheeks. Thank you. You kept me safe. He smiled softly. You don't need to thank me, he replied. I just did what was right. The girl hesitated, then pressed the pouch into his hands. Mother says you are brave, she said. She wants to meet you. Daniel blinked. The thought of meeting the leader of the Vayari sent a ripple of nervousness through him. He had no idea what to expect or why the queen would be interested in him at all. Yet he felt a strange sense of honor. This child had trusted him, and now her mother, the most important Vayari in the colony, wanted to know him. Back in her chambers, Sarathia prepared herself for the encounter. She did not often meet humans outside of official matters, and when she did, she always measured them carefully, but this human, Daniel, was different. His actions spoke louder than words, and she was determined to understand his character fully. The meeting was arranged in a neutral space, a small hall that overlooked the mining fields. Daniel entered cautiously, the child trailing behind him. Sarathia rose to greet him. Her presence was commanding, yet there was a subtle softness in her gaze. "You are the human who protected my child," she said, her voice calm but firm. Daniel bowed slightly. "Yes, Your Majesty, I only wanted to keep her safe." Sarathia studied him for a long moment. "Your people often look at us with fear or disdain," she said. "And yet, you did not hesitate to take the punishment meant for her. Why?" Daniel thought carefully. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. "She did not deserve harm. No one does." The Queen's eyes softened just slightly. "Humans rarely act with such clarity," she said. "You could have ignored her, yet you chose not to. That is rare. It is honorable." The child looked up at Daniel, her eyes shining. She had wanted him to know that her mother recognized his courage. Daniel felt a warmth in his chest, a feeling he had not experienced before. Pride, yes, but also a quiet sense of belonging. He had done something meaningful, and it mattered. As days passed, Daniel's life began to change subtly. The Veyari started to treat him differently. Workers in the colony who once ignored him now offered small gestures of respect, helping him with tasks, sharing food, or simply nodding when he passed. The child visited him often, bringing small gifts from her people. Each time she reminded him of the bond that had begun between them, a bond built on trust and bravery. Yet not everyone was pleased. Some humans viewed Daniel's actions with suspicion. "Why does he care so much about the aliens?" they whispered. "Is he betraying us?" Others avoided him, unwilling to be associated with someone who crossed the usual boundaries. Daniel tried not to let it bother him. He knew he had done what was right, and that mattered more than gossip. The Queen, meanwhile, watched from a distance. She observed Daniel in everyday situations, how he spoke, how he acted, how he treated both humans and Veyari. Each observation reinforced her belief. This human was different. He possessed a quiet strength, a resilience, and a sense of fairness that few could claim. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the colony, Sarathia summoned Daniel to her chambers. The child ran ahead, excited to deliver the message. Daniel followed, heart pounding with curiosity and nervousness. Inside, the Queen was waiting. She gestured for him to sit. "Daniel," she said, her voice calm but commanding, "your actions have reached my attention. I have watched you. I have seen your courage, your patience, and your care. And I have decided." She paused, letting the moment hang in the air. Daniel's stomach tightened. "Decided what, Your Majesty?" "That you will be under my protection," she said finally. "You have shown a rare heart, and for that, you will have my trust. My people will watch you closely, yes, but they will also respect you. Your choices have given you a place here." Daniel felt a mixture of surprise and honor. "Under your protection?" he asked. Sarathia nodded. "Yes, this does not mean you are my servant. It means that your actions have earned you recognition, and I will ensure your safety and guidance. You have done what few humans would do. You have shown us the power of your people's courage and compassion." The child clapped her hands softly, eyes shining with joy. Daniel looked at her and then at the Queen, feeling a new kind of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He had only wanted to protect a child, yet now he had become part of something larger than himself, a living example of the bridge between humans and Veyari. Over the next days, Daniel began learning about the Veyari in ways he had never imagined. He was taught about their customs, their stories, and their values. He began to see their world not as alien, but as a culture full of depth, tradition, and honor. And he realized something important. His single act of bravery had opened doors that no one could have predicted. Even among whispers and curiosity, Daniel felt a quiet pride. He had acted with kindness, and in return he had earned trust, respect, and a chance to belong to a people he had once thought were strangers. The colony continued its work, but now there was a subtle shift. Humans and Veyari alike began to see that perhaps through courage and compassion, connections could be made. And at the center of this change stood Daniel, a human who had endured, acted, and unknowingly started to build a bridge between worlds. As the night deepened, Daniel returned to his small quarters. He held the pouch of herbs given by the child in his hands, thinking about everything that had happened. He understood now that his life was no longer ordinary. Something important had begun, a story that involved trust, bravery, and the slow, careful building of respect between two very different peoples. And somewhere in the chambers of the Veyari, Queen Sarathia smiled faintly. She knew the human was only at the beginning of his journey, yet already he had shown what her people could respect. She could see the potential in him, the heart of a bridge, the courage to endure, and the ability to inspire. Daniel had not sought glory. He had not asked for recognition. He had acted from the simplest place in the human heart, a desire to protect, to care, and to do what was right. And in doing so, he had changed the world around him in ways he could not yet fully understand. The days passed slowly on Veyara 6, each one filled with the steady rhythm of work, learning, and observation. Daniel had begun to adjust to the subtle attention from the Veyari. Wherever he went, small gestures of acknowledgement followed him. A nod from a worker, a soft smile from a child, or a curious glance from an adult. While he appreciated it, he remained cautious. Humans around him still whispered, some with suspicion, others with quiet curiosity. But he knew he could not please everyone. His actions had set him on a new path, and that path belonged to both humans and Veyari now. One morning, Daniel was summoned to the central plaza. The child who had brought him the pouch of herbs ran ahead, excitedly waving him forward. The air buzzed with tension as more Veyari gathered, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Among them stood Queen Sarathia, her posture tall and commanding. Today was no ordinary meeting. Daniel felt a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness. He had seen her from a distance, had experienced her presence, but today her attention was directed at him alone. "You have been observed closely," Sarathia began, her voice carrying across the plaza without the need for any amplification. "Your actions have been noted, your character measured. It is clear you are different from many humans I have encountered." Daniel bowed slightly, unsure how to respond. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said quietly. "I only did what I thought was right." Sarathia's gaze was steady, unyielding. "It is not enough to act rightly," she said. "One must also possess understanding, patience, and courage. You have shown these qualities, and for that reason—" She paused, letting her words hang in the air, drawing every eye to the human before her. Daniel's heart raced. He did not know what was coming. "For that reason?" he asked cautiously. "For that reason," Sarathia continued, "I claim you under my protection." A murmur went through the crowd. Humans exchanged worried glances, unsure what it meant to be claimed by an alien queen. Some frowned, others whispered among themselves, but no one dared challenge her declaration. The Veyari, on the other hand, watched with admiration. Being claimed by the queen was a great honor, a sign of trust and recognition that few outsiders could ever earn. Daniel stepped forward, hesitant. "Under your protection, Your Majesty. I don't understand," he admitted. "You have acted for my child without hesitation," Sarathia said. "You endured suffering not for personal gain, but for the sake of another. That is rare among humans. That is worthy of recognition. From this day forward, you will be watched, guided, and protected by my house. You will not be left alone to face danger. My people will respect you, and I will ensure your safety." Daniel swallowed hard. His mind raced with questions. "Does this mean I must live with you?" he asked carefully. Sarathia nodded. "Yes, though this is not a command. You are free in spirit, but your presence among my people is expected. There is much to learn, and much to understand about our ways. You will live among us not as a servant, but as one we recognize as honorable. You will be part of my household and my observation." The child's eyes lit up with excitement. She had wanted him to know that her mother was watching, that she valued him. Daniel looked at her, then back at the queen, feeling a wave of responsibility settle over him. This was more than protection. It was recognition, trust, and a call to action. Over the next few days, Daniel began his new life among the Veyari. His quarters were small but comfortable, placed within the living area of the queen's household. The space was simple yet elegant, reflecting Veyari design with soft, light panels, smooth surfaces, and quiet efficiency. He was introduced to other members of her household, advisors, guardians, and attendants. Some were wary of him, others curious, but all treated him with a respect he had never experienced before. Daniel's routine changed. He learned to navigate the complex hierarchy of the Veyari, understanding their customs and values. The queen assigned a few guides to help him, teaching him language nuances, gestures, and ways to interact respectfully. At first, he struggled with their customs. Small mistakes brought raised eyebrows or quiet whispers, but he persisted. Every effort he made was noted, every attempt to understand appreciated. One day, while walking through the inner gardens of the queen's quarters, Daniel reflected on the changes in his life. The gardens were unlike anything he had seen on the colony: lush greenery, vibrant flowers, and soft pools of water reflecting the light of the twin moons. The air was fragrant, and the sound of water created a calm rhythm. Here, surrounded by beauty and life, Daniel understood that his actions had bridged a gap he never thought possible. The child ran ahead, calling for him to join her. She led him to a small pool where reflections danced in the water. "Look," she said, pointing at the ripples. "Your bravery made this possible." Daniel looked puzzled. "This?" he asked. "This," she said. "The peace between humans and Veyari. They watch you now and wonder if maybe humans are not so different. Maybe humans can be trusted." Daniel smiled softly. "I didn't do this alone," he said. "I only acted for what was right, and that is why the queen values you," the child replied. Word of Daniel's claim spread quickly among the colony. Humans reacted with mixed feelings. Some were skeptical, some fearful, and others secretly impressed. They saw that the queen's acknowledgement was not a minor honor. It was a public statement that he was special, someone to be watched and respected. The Veyari, meanwhile, began to accept him more fully. Guardians offered guidance, advisors shared insights, and even the more skeptical members began to nod in approval. Daniel's willingness to learn, his patience, and his consistent kindness earned him a growing respect. One afternoon, as he practiced understanding Veyari customs, a group of young Veyari approached him. "You are different from the humans we usually see," one said, curiosity shining in his eyes. "You endure pain, yet you do not retaliate. You help without reward." "Why?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Because it is the right thing," he replied simply. "Because we all share this world. Because kindness is stronger than fear." The young Veyari exchanged glances, impressed by his answer. "Perhaps humans can teach us," another said, quietly. Daniel nodded, smiling. He had never imagined that a simple act of protecting a child could ripple outward in such a profound way. In the evenings, Daniel spent time learning directly from the queen. Sarathia shared her knowledge of Veyari, history, philosophy, and leadership. She spoke of courage, honor, and loyalty, values that had guided her people for generations. Daniel listened carefully, realizing how much he could learn from them, just as they could learn from him. One night, after a long discussion about leadership and compassion, Sarathia looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "Daniel," she said, "your presence here changes more than just your life. You remind us of what is possible. You remind us that courage, compassion, and patience are not limited to one species. You are a symbol of hope. Daniel felt a weight on his shoulders. He had never asked for recognition or praise. He had only acted out of instinct, out of care. Yet here he was, a human who had earned the respect of an entire alien culture, and perhaps even inspired a change in perspective for both humans and Veyari. The child ran to him that night, excited as always. "Mother says you are special," she said, hugging him tightly. "She says you are now part of us and we will help you always." Daniel hugged her back gently. "I don't know if I deserve that," he said softly. The child smiled knowingly. "It is not about deserving, Daniel. It is about what you chose to do. That is what matters." As he lay in his quarters that night, Daniel thought about the events that had brought him here. The beating, the fear, the choice to protect a child. All of it had led to this moment. He realized that life was not always about seeking honor or recognition. Sometimes it was about choosing to act rightly, even when no one was watching. And sometimes, those choices could change the course of many lives. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be misunderstandings, questions, and perhaps even tests of his character. But for the first time, Daniel felt a sense of purpose beyond the routine of the colony. He had acted from his heart, and in return, he had found a place where courage, kindness, and resilience mattered, and that, he understood, was only the beginning. Life among the Veyari was unlike anything Daniel had ever experienced. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to understand the alien culture. The colony's daily work continued, but now Daniel's life had a deeper meaning. He was not just a worker or a bystander. He was a human under the Queen's protection, a symbol of trust, and someone the Veyari were beginning to respect. Despite this honor, belonging was not easy. Many Veyari were skeptical of him. They had seen humans act in selfish ways before, acting only for gain or personal pride. Daniel's kindness and courage had impressed them, but he still had to prove himself further. The first trial came unexpectedly. A group of young Veyari guardians approached him one morning, their movements precise and disciplined. "Daniel," one said, "if you wish to live among us fully, you must learn our ways. You must prove that your actions are not accidental, that your heart truly aligns with ours." Daniel nodded. He was ready. "I will do my best," he said simply. The guardians guided him through a series of tests designed to measure patience, intelligence, and character. The first challenge was one of observation. He was brought to a complex garden of shifting plants and soft streams. The guardians asked him to identify subtle changes in the environment, leaves that had turned color, water levels that had shifted, small signs of life that most humans would overlook. At first, Daniel struggled. His eyes were not trained to notice the smallest details, but he remembered the small Veyari child, the way she had clung to her toy, the subtle hints of her fear, and he realized he could notice small things if he focused. Slowly, carefully, he began pointing out patterns, changes, and details in the garden. The guardians watched silently, impressed by his growing awareness. Next came a test of patience. Daniel was asked to guide a small group of young Veyari through a maze of bridges and soft water pools, where any wrong step could result in wet clothes or a minor mishap. At first he hesitated, unsure how to communicate the correct path without frightening them or causing confusion. But then he remembered his simple rule: act with care, speak with clarity, and think of others first. Slowly he guided the children, gently correcting mistakes and encouraging them when they faltered. By the end of the task, the guardians nodded, in approval. The third trial tested his courage, though not in the way Daniel expected. He was led to a large chamber where the air shimmered with holographic projections. Images of danger, conflict, and fear appeared on every surface. Humans fighting humans, Veyari under threat, creatures of unknown origin attacking settlements. Daniel was asked to step forward and face these illusions, to remain calm, and to act rationally. At first his heart raced. The projections were vivid and frightening. But he remembered the child, remembered her trust in him, and realized that fear could not control his actions. He took slow, careful steps, analyzed the scenarios, and made choices to protect and guide virtual victims. Each decision was measured, thoughtful, and compassionate. By the time the projection ended, the guardians were smiling. Daniel had passed. After the trials, Daniel spent time learning the deeper traditions of the Veyari. He practiced their gestures, learned their words of respect, and studied their ceremonies. Each lesson deepened his understanding, and each day, he began to feel less like an outsider and more like someone who truly belonged. Still, challenges remained. Some adults watched him closely, their eyes skeptical. They questioned whether a human could truly live by Veyari values. Daniel did not respond with arguments or explanations. Instead, he acted with consistent kindness, fairness, and patience. Over time, actions spoke louder than words, and slowly, respect grew. The small Veyari child continued to visit him, always bringing gifts, sometimes small flowers, sometimes herbs, and sometimes nothing at all except her smile. "You are learning," she said one day, "and soon everyone will see that you belong." Daniel smiled at her. "I hope so," he said. "I just want to do right by everyone." Even the queen took notice of his progress. Sarathia observed him in private discussions, during ceremonies, and in moments of daily life. She saw how he approached problems with patience, how he respected both humans and Veyari, and how he had begun to inspire trust in both sides. One day, she called him into her chambers. "Daniel," she said, "your trials are not yet over, but you have done more than most humans could. You have proven your heart. But there is one final test, not of skill, not of strength, but of choice." Daniel listened carefully, curiosity piqued. "There will be situations in the future," she continued, "where humans and Veyari may disagree, where fear, misunderstanding, or anger may lead to conflict. You will have to choose your actions wisely. You will need to guide, protect, and mediate. That is your final trial, to act rightly even when others doubt you, even when others oppose you." Daniel nodded slowly. "I will do my best, Your Majesty. I promise." The queen smiled faintly. "I know you will. That is why you belong here. You have already begun to shape the future, not through force but through courage and care. Remember that, Daniel." In the weeks that followed, Daniel continued to participate in the colony's work. But his role had shifted subtly. He was no longer just a worker or a human among aliens. He was a bridge, a living example of what courage, patience, and selflessness could achieve. Humans and Veyari alike began to see that respect and trust could grow when someone chose to act rightly. One day, the child brought him a small gift, a flower that glowed faintly in the moonlight. "For you," she said, "a sign of belonging." Daniel took it carefully, smiling. "Thank you. I will treasure it." The trials had tested him in ways he never imagined: observation, patience, courage, and choice. Yet he realized that the greatest trial was not in the tasks or lessons. It was in living each day with integrity, kindness, and care. It was in choosing to act rightly when it was easiest to turn away. And in that choice, Daniel discovered something extraordinary. Belonging was not given. It was earned through actions, heart, and courage. As night fell over the colony, Daniel looked out at the twin moons rising in the sky. He felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that his trials had strengthened him, that he had grown, and that he had begun to bridge the gap between humans and Veyari. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but he was ready. He had proven himself, and he knew that with care, patience, and courage, he could face whatever came next. The colony of Veyara 6 had changed. Life continued with the hum of machinery, the chatter of humans, and the quiet grace of the Veyari. Yet beneath this normal rhythm, a deeper change was taking place, one that few could see, but one that all would feel. Daniel had become a symbol, a bridge between two cultures, and a reminder that courage and kindness could alter the course of lives. Even after his trials, Daniel knew the path ahead would not be easy. Humans and Veyari had long histories of misunderstanding, fear, and separation. Conflicts, even small ones, could arise at any moment. But Daniel was prepared. He had learned patience, understanding, and the subtle art of mediation. More than that, he had learned the power of quiet courage. One morning, news arrived that tensions had risen between the human workers and a group of Veyari miners. A misunderstanding over resources had escalated into loud arguments. Daniel was called to the center of the dispute. Both sides turned to him, unsure what a single human could do. He stepped forward calmly. "Listen," he said gently but firmly. "We all share this land, these resources, and this work. No one benefits if we fight. Let us talk, understand, and find a solution together." At first, neither side listened. Voices rose, accusations were made. Daniel remained calm, speaking slowly, repeating words of understanding, showing patience. He reminded both sides of his own experience, how he had stood to protect a Veyari child, how courage and care could change hearts. Slowly, the anger began to fade. Both humans and Veyari looked at him, considering his words. By evening, an agreement had been reached. Resources were divided fairly, misunderstandings cleared, and mutual respect restored. Daniel had acted as a mediator, not with authority but with empathy, patience, and reason. It was a small victory, but it marked something greater, the beginning of true cooperation between the two peoples. The child, who had started it all, ran to him afterward, hugging him tightly. "You did it," she exclaimed. "You helped everyone understand each other." Daniel smiled. "We did it together," he corrected. "It is always about working together." Word of his actions spread quickly. The queen called him to her chambers. Sarathia looked at him, her eyes reflecting both pride and respect. "Daniel," she said, "you have proven that courage, patience, and care can change more than one life. You have inspired humans and Veyari alike. You have become more than a symbol. You are a true bond between our peoples." Daniel bowed. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I only try to do what is right." "That is enough," she said softly. "Sometimes doing what is right is the greatest strength of all." In the following months, Daniel's role grew. He continued, learning Veyari culture, helping with disputes, and guiding young humans and Veyari alike. His bond with the child strengthened, and he became a mentor and friend to others. The colony slowly transformed, a little brighter, a little kinder, and a little more united. Even humans who had doubted him began to respect his choices. They saw that integrity, courage, and care could inspire change. They began to listen more carefully, to act more thoughtfully, and to consider the perspectives of the Veyari. Daniel had shown them what one person could do when guided by heart rather than fear. One quiet evening, Daniel stood in the inner gardens of the queen's household, looking at the twin moons reflecting in the water. The child approached, holding a small glowing flower in her hand. "For you," she said, "to remember what we have built together." Daniel took the flower, smiling. "It is beautiful," he said, "but the most beautiful thing is the trust we have earned." The queen appeared beside them, placing a gentle hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You have changed our world," she said. "Not with weapons, not with power, but with courage, patience, and heart. You have given us hope, Daniel. You have shown what humans can offer." Daniel felt a quiet warmth. He realized that he had not just protected a child. He had built connections, inspired understanding, and become part of a story far larger than himself. He had endured, acted, and now belonged. The colony continued its work, but the future felt brighter. Humans and Veyari walked side by side more, often helping one another, learning from one another, and sharing small acts of kindness. Daniel had become a bridge, and in that bridge, Both peoples found hope. As the night deepened, Daniel looked at the stars above Veyara 6. He thought of the beating he had endured, the choices he had made, and the trust he had earned. He understood now that courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting rightly despite fear. It was enduring hardship for the sake of others. And it was in that courage that bonds were formed and worlds changed. The child smiled up at him, holding his hand. The queen watched from nearby, quietly proud, and Daniel knew, with certainty, that he had found not just honor, but a new family, a new purpose, and a place where he truly belonged.